हेलो एवरीवन, गुड इवनिंग टू ऑल ऑफ यू। डिस्कस करते हैं किस तरह ट्रेंडिंग न्यूज़ से इंग्लिश वोकाबुलरी, ग्रामर रूल्स, ट्रेंडिंग न्यूज़ एंड रीडिंग स्किल्स सीख सकते हैं। तो चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं। फर्स्ट इज, व्हाई डिड ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट apologize? Why did Iran's president apologize? ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट, यहाँ पे एपोस्ट्रोफी एस है, मतलब इसका मतलब है का ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट। क्वेश्चन क्वेश्चन है, वाई से स्टार्ट हो रहा है, क्वेश्चन वर्ड है, तो डिड पहले, उसके बाद मेन वर्ब आती है यहाँ पर। वाई डिड के बाद जो लिखते हैं वर्ब, वो वर्ब वन आती है। एपोलोजाइज यहाँ पे V1 में है। वाई डिड ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट एपोलोजाइज? नेक्स्ट, ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट मसूद पेजेश्कियन सरप्राइज्ड। ईरान्स प्रेसिडेंट मसूद सरप्राइज्ड many observers when he apologized। यहाँ पे apologized जो है वो सेकेंड फॉर्म में है। टू ईरान्स नेबर्स for recent strikes against them during an address। during an address यहाँ पे क्या है, नाउन है। delivered on Saturday, कोई भी डे से पहले प्रीपोजिशन ऑन लगता है। ऑन सैटरडे मॉर्निंग एज पार्ट ऑफ द कंट्रीज इंटरिम लीडरशिप। एपोलोजाइज बिटवीन स्टेट्स आर रेयर। रेयर मतलब बहुत कम। एपोलोजाइज बिटवीन स्टेट्स आर रेयर, particularly during active conflict। conflict यहाँ पे क्या है, disagreement। particularly during active conflict and the wording stood out। leaders usually express, leaders यहाँ पे क्या है, प्लूरल है, एस लगा हुआ है, तो प्लूरल वर्ब में एस नहीं लगा रहता है, V1 रहता है। leaders usually express regret or distance themselves from responsibility। Pezeshkian instead directly acknowledged that neighboring countries had been targeted and said Iranian forces had now been asked to stop striking। टू ऐसे प्रीपोजिशन है, इसके बाद हमेशा V1 लगती है, तो यहाँ स्टॉप जो है V1 है। Them unless attacks on Iran originate from their territory। Next, I deem it necessary to apologize। 2 plus V1, I deem it necessary to apologize to neighboring countries। यहाँ पे neighboring जो है एडजेक्टिव है। टू के बाद जो neighboring है ये वर्ब नहीं है, एडजेक्टिव है, एंड कंट्रीज यहाँ पे नाउन है। आई डीम इट नेसेसरी टू अपोलोजाइज टू नेबरिंग कंट्रीज दैट वेयर यहाँ पे वेयर जो है कंट्रीज के लिए है। अटैक्ड, ही सेड, वी डू नॉट इंटेंड टू इन्वेड नेबरिंग कंट्रीज। दैट अलोन रेजेस द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन। दैट अलोन रेजेस यहाँ पे क्या है, V5 है। द फर्स्ट क्वेश्चन वॉज, दिस इज सॉरी, was this a genuine apology? यहाँ पे apology जो है वो noun है और genuine क्या है, adjective है. Was this a genuine apology? And why now? And why now? One possibility is that the interim leadership is trying to contain. Is plus V4 प्रेजेंट कंटिन्यूअस में लगाते हैं, एक्टिव वॉइस में. Is trying to contain the widening regional fallout. Some countries in the region have been caught in the crossfire after strikes launched by the United States and Israel on Saturday, 28 February. Pezeshkian suggested these attacks were carried out under fire and will instructions after the initial wave of strikes. इनिशियल यहाँ पे क्या है, एडजेक्टिव है और वेब नाउन है. आफ्टर द इनिशियल वेव ऑफ स्ट्राइक्स किल्ड सीनियर Iranian commanders and disrupted central command structures. Next. By apologizing, यहाँ पे by है. by प्रीपोजिशन के बाद V1 प्लस ing लिखते हैं. टू के अलावा और जो प्रीपोजिशन आती है उसके बाद वर्ब जब लिखते हैं तो वर्ब 1 प्लस ing लिखते हैं. तो by apologizing, he may be trying to signal that Tehran does not want to escalate. Escalate क्या होता है, increase. Does not want to escalate the war into a broader regional confrontation. The message also implicitly acknowledges. implicitly यहाँ पे क्या है, एडवर्ब है जो कि वर्ब को मॉडिफाई कर रहा है. acknowledges a political reality. Even if some neighboring countries allowed US forces to operate from bases on their territory, Iran risks isolating itself further if it openly targets them. But whether the apology translates into policy is far less clear. Reports from the region indicate. Reports यहाँ पे सब्जेक्ट है और प्लूरल है, वर्ब प्लूरल वर्ब है, इंडिकेट. अगर सब्जेक्ट में एस लगा हुआ है, प्लूरल है, तो वर्ब में एस रिमूव करते हैं. रिपोर्ट्स फ्रॉम द रीजन indicates that strikes linked to Iran or its forces have not yet stopped. Qatar and the UAE both said, both यहाँ पे दोनों है. Qatar and the UAE both said on Saturday afternoon they had intercepted missiles targeting them. Next. If attacks continue, it raises a deeper question about control within Iran's fractured leadership structure. Iran's fractured leadership structure. Since the first wave of attacks killed की फिगर्स, की यहाँ पे क्या है, इम्पोर्टेंट है, इंक्लूडिंग सुप्रीम लीडर अयातोल्ला अली खamenei, decision making has shifted to an interim leadership council. In theory, that structure gives, in theory, that structure gives figures like Phaeacian more influence than they previously had under a system dominated by a single supreme authority. In practice यहाँ पे noun है. However, the ability to control powerful military and security institutions such as the Revolutionary Guards remains uncertain, जो कि certain नहीं है. If Iranian linked strikes on neighboring states continue despite the president's statement, it would suggest either breakdowns in communication or resistance from factions unwilling to scale back the confrontation. Either और साथ में होती है. It would suggest either breakdowns in communication or resistance. ब्रेकडाउन्स यहाँ पे नाउन है. इधर के बाद अगर नाउन होती है तो और के बाद भी नाउन आती है. फ्रॉम फैक्शंस अनविलिंग टू स्केल बैक द कॉन्फ्रंटेशंस. नेक्स्ट, hardline elements within the security establishment have long argued that regional pressure is Iran's strongest deterrent against US and Israeli military power. Domestic reactions also reflect that tension. Some hardliners have already criticized. है प्लस V3, तो यहाँ पे क्रिटिसाइज्ड V3 है. क्रिटिसाइज्ड का क्या मतलब होता है? किसी का बुराई करना. हार्डलाइनर्स हैव ऑलरेडी क्रिटिसाइज्ड Pezeshkian's remarks as weak. The current political moment in Iran is unusual. The current political moment in Iran is unusual. Several of the most powerful hardline figures at the top of the system are gone, but many lower-ranking officials and commanders remain deeply suspicious. Suspicious यहाँ पे क्या है? Doubt. Deeply suspicious of any conciliatory tone. For them, apologizing to foreign governments risks appearing as capitulation at a time of national crisis. Next is outside Iran. Outside Iran, the reaction has been shaped. Outside Iran, the reaction has been shaped by a very different narrative. Donald Trump quickly claimed on Truth Social that Iran had apologized and surrendered to its neighbors, arguing that the move proved US and Israeli military pressure was working. The language also reveals how Washington may interpret Tehran's signals. Trump has repeatedly insisted Trump has repeatedly insisted that one only acceptable outcome is Iran's total surrender. That demand creates a diplomatic paradox. Diplomatic means skillful. Historically, countries rarely accept unconditional surrender. Historically, countries rarely accept, rarely means यहाँ पे बहुत कम. Countries rarely accept unconditional surrender under air campaigns alone, no matter how intense the bombing without ground forces. Forcing such an outcome is extremely difficult. Next. Interpret Pezeshkian's apology as form of capitulation could therefore serve as a political breeze for Washington, a way to claim progress without formally abandoning the demand for surrender. For Pezeshkian and the interim leadership council, the calculation may be different. The calculation may be different. Achieving a ceasefire now could establish the situation before a new permanent leader emerges. If the next figure to dominate Iran's political system where a hardline cleric, the prospects for diplomacy could become even narrower. That possibility raises another strategic question: is Pezeshkian positioning himself as a negotiable figure, the kind of pragmatic leader Western governments might prefer to deal with? Next. In his address, he tried to balance defiance. In his address, he tried to balance defiance and offense, rejecting surrender while signaling restraint towards neighboring states. At the same time, the struggle over Iran's future leadership is already beginning to take shape. Various political and clerical figures, as well as commanders within the IRGC and the security forces, may see the current crisis as an opportunity to strengthen their position. Some are calling on the assembly of experts to move quickly to choose the next leader. If Pezeshkian fails to deliver stability or assert control over the armed forces, rivals could argue that a more hardline approach is needed. For now, the immediate test lies outside Iran's borders. Next. So far, many neighboring countries have responded. Cautiously, carefully, or remained silent, waiting to see whether the apology leads to real changes. on the ground. Israel, which views Israel, which views the conflict as a rare chance to weaken. Weaken यहाँ पे V1 है. What it sees as Iran's long-term threat may be less inclined to interpret the message as a genuine step towards de-escalation. The ambiguity मतलब not clear होता है. The ambiguity may be deliberate. Pezeshkian's apology leaves room for several interpretations, a genuine attempt to calm regional tensions. Calm यहाँ पे mitigate करना. To calm regional tensions and tactical move यहाँ पे क्या है, noun है, tactical adjective है. A tactical move to buy time for Iran's interim leadership, or the opening signal of a political repositioning inside Tehran itself, in a conflict shaped as much by internal power struggles as by external war. It may be all three at once. Next is sheep are. sheep हमेशा प्लूरल रहता है पर सिंगुलर फॉर्म में लिखते हैं. sheep are disappearing from our hills and our dinner plates. Next is four generations. Neil Hasseltine's family have worked on hilltop farm, perched on the hillside of Malhamdal amid the dramatic landscape of the Berkshire Dales, and for most of that time sheep were mainstay of the business. But Neil says, over the past 20 years, there has been a complete turnaround, and he has shifted away from sheep farming to stay afloat. In that time, the 1,500-acre farm has gone. Gone यहाँ पे थर्ड फॉर्म है, इसका फर्स्ट फॉर्म होता है go and second form went. 1,500-acre farm has gone from a peak of over 800 lambing sheep to just 45 this spring. I dread to think where the farm would have been financially had we not started to make those changes. He tells me, I either continued along the sheep farming route because of sentimentality or made bold decisions. While most affluent farmers still keep sheep on their land, the changes here have been mirrored across not just the Dales but the entire British farming industry. The shepherd's life has never been an easy one. The shepherd's life has never been an easy one, but more many it's getting tougher and more difficult than ever to make a profit. Next. The average British farmer is 60 years old. According to the National Farmers Union, and prices for everything from fuel to fodder have risen hugely. Have risen यहाँ पे थर्ड फॉर्म है, have के साथ जो थर्ड फॉर्म लिखते हैं इसका फर्स्ट फॉर्म होती है rise होती है. To fodder have risen hugely for them in recent years. Meanwhile, Many farmers are facing significantly reduced income from subsidies, and there are worries that recent trade deals will mean increased competition from overseas. The UK's recent trade deals with New Zealand and Australia struck since Brexit eliminate tariffs and give producers in both countries large quotas on the amount of lamb they can export into the UK. There are now 14.7 million breeding ewes in the UK, the lowest figure in living memory, according to Phil Stoker, chief executive of the National Sheep Association. Overall, the national flock is also falling down to 30.4 million sheep in 2025, numbers last seen in the mid 20th century when the UK population was smaller, and thus the potential market for lamb and mutton reared here was much lower. Next. UK sheep population lowest in over 40 years. UK sheep population lowest in over 40 years. Number of sheep in the UK at June at 1 June 1984 to 2025. Next. And over the last 50 years, there has been a significant fall. Fall यहाँ पे noun है. And over the last 50 years, there has been a significant fall in lamb and mutton consumption, according to Wacky Smith, a senior analyst at the Agriculture and Horticulture Development Board, which represents farmers in 1980. The average UK household purchased 128 gram of sheep meat, lamb and mutton per person per week. In 2024, that same measure was down to 23 gram per person per week. Sheep farming has shaped the image many of us have when we picture somewhere like the Dells with dry stone walls to keep livestock enclosed and green, rolling hills kept short by seasonal grazing, but any desire to protect the heritage of one of the UK's oldest agricultural industries is rubbing up against not just a diminishing appetite for sheep. Diminishing का मतलब भी होता है decreasing. Just a diminishing appetite for sheep meat, but also the question of whether some of our uplands might be better used to promote nature recovery and biodiversity. Next. All this raises the question of whether we have passed peak sheep in the UK and in turn what that might mean for consumers. Will my children still be eating our lamb for their Sunday roast or in their Baltis and Wunas in 25 years' time? And what will happen to some of our most revered and beloved landscapes like the Lake District, uh, Yorkshire Dales, Scottish Highlands, and Welsh Mountains, and the people who live and work there? Next. Why sheep farming has become so tough. Why sheep farming has become so tough? At Craven Cattle Mart on the outskirts of Skipton, North Yorkshire, the auction ring is buzzing as farmers from across the Yorkshire Dales and Pennines come to buy and sell livestock. To an outsider, business might look bricks, but General Manager Jeremy Eaton says it's nowhere near as busy as when he started in the industry 47 years ago. We would have some sales at this market where we would regularly be selling 19,000 store lamps. He says, now we were fortunate if we get to 8,000 or 9,000. People who work sheep know that it is some of the hardest farming there is. A former shepherd once told me that sheep are only ever trying to do one of three things: escape or die, or escape and then immediately die. Globally, lamb consumption is expected to grow by 15% between now and 2032. According to a report from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development and the Food and Agriculture Organization, but changing tastes in the UK mean mutton made from mature sheep is no longer eaten in the same volume it was by previous generations, and lamb has seemingly gone from weekly staple to a meat more often eaten on special occasions, with white meat, like chicken, being increasingly chosen over lamb and beef. The drop in the national flock has actually led to robust growth in the price paid for lamb, according to Waxy Smith from the AHDB, with the sheep price hitting record highs in 2024. But despite the higher price for their sheep, upland farmers with tight margins feel the pinch more than many when diesel and oil costs go up. And on top of that, the cost of feeding sheep has also rocketed. The average cost of the bale of hay is farmers and groups such as Compassions in the World Farming have also raised concerns that new trade deals could undermine UK agriculture because firms here must meet high welfare standards that may not required in several partner countries. Extremely tight margins mean growing numbers of younger people can't see a future in farming. This is immediately apparent as you wander around Craven cattle marts. You can see here today Most of the generation of farmers are over 60, says Hele Vance, a 39-year-old sheep farmer from Gisborne in the Ribble Valley. There aren't many young ones because there is better options and some welcome the decline in sheep farming. Fewer sheep means less suffering. Fewer sheep means less suffering. A sheep's life in the wool and mutton industries values our reputation as a nation of animal lovers, says Mimi Bekaichi, Senior Vice President at the UK's People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, PETA. The UK's Climate Change Committee has also previously advised the government to encourage people to cut the amount of meat and dairy they consume to combat climate change. Combat यहाँ पे fight. Next. How changing subsidies have made an impact, Mathieu Cole of the NFU says. A further issue has been the move, especially post-Brexit, away from farmers receiving paid subsidies from the EU either for the volume of livestock they have or amount of land they farm. In their place, successive UK governments have introduced new schemes with a stronger focus on farming for nature, meaning many farmers are facing significantly reduced subsidy income. Next. For example, the Westminster government's sustainable farming incentive scheme, which was updated last month, includes further incentives for farmers in England and Wales to graze more land with cattle and ponies instead of sheep, as it contributes positively to biodiversity. Cattle, for example, do not graze as low to the ground as sheep, allowing smaller plants to flower. Next. Neil Hasseltine of Hill Top Farm now has 300 cattle who graze outside all year round, a shift that he says has made the farm more profitable and dramatically reduced the hours he has to put into it. But while these new subsidy schemes are welcomed in principle by many farmers, some find the fundings available false far short of the levels provided under earlier support systems. Going forward, do I see a future? I am not sure where we are going with it, said James Foster, who has been farming beef and sheep on the Bolton Away estate for 30 years. I do believe the government don't want us, but people have to eat and we just have to adapt with that. Next. Next is DEFRA says that an average of 2.3 billion a year is being invested through its farming schemes in England and Wales and insists it is protecting farmers in trade deals and also making supply chains fairer. Today, Scottish sheep upland farmers face many of the same challenges of tighter margins, rising cost, falling appetite for lamb and mutton, and Holyrood government have likewise tried to move towards a subsidy regime which gives greater weight to the environmental benefits farmers can provide. One example is the Sheep and Trees initiative, which aims to help farmers and land managers plant more woodlands without cutting the size of their. There have been complaints There have been complaints from farmers that some of the schemes introduced in Scotland have not been easy enough. Easy enough, जब हम एडजेक्टिव लिखते हैं तो एडजेक्टिव के बाद एनफ आती है. अगर नाउन लिखते हैं तो नाउन के बाद एनफ के बाद नाउन लिखते हैं. इजी यहाँ पे एडजेक्टिव है तो इजी के बाद एनफ है. इजी एनफ टू एक्सेस, लीडिंग द एग्रीकल्चर मिनिस्टर जिम फर्ली टू कमिट to reviewing certain projects. commit to के बाद जो लिखते हैं जेरन लिखते हैं. जेरन मतलब यहाँ पे V4 होता है, V1 प्लस ing. रिव्यूइंग यहाँ पे जेरन है. to reviewing certain projects at the start of this year, NFU Scotland and other farming organizations also raised concerns that the amount of government money budgeted to support agriculture was not enough either to support farmers to profitably make food or to help. यहाँ पे either के बाद to support और के बाद to help them meet climate and nature goals. In Northern Ireland, the sheep population has fallen for several years, with the most recent stats from 2024 showing 1.9 million sheep across the region. The Ulster Farmers Union has criticized the exclusion of sheep farmers from the developed administration's future agriculture policy and called on Northern Ireland's Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs to engage with the industry. Next, compromise and respect. Sheep were first domesticated approximately 10,500 years ago in the Middle East and were eventually brought to British shores. Eventually means finally brought to British shores by Neolithic farmers. Sometime around 4000 BC, sheep became such an important part of the landscape that by medieval times the phrase "half the wealth of England rides on the back of the sheep" became familiar. In Scotland, sheep have also played a pivotal role. Pivotal means यहाँ पे important role in the rural economy. For generation and Scotland's sheep population there has been more stable in recent years at around 6.5 million. The history of Scottish sheep farming is also indelibly tied up with controversial highland clearances when in the late 18th and 19th century traditional cropping families were moved off the land when Landowners realized they could make more money from farming sheep than leasing their land. In 2004, sheep were removed from the limestone landscapes of Inglevorov, the second highest mountain in the Yorkshire Dales, and replaced with roaming native cattle breeds who are less intensive grazers as part of the Wild Inglevorov project. Next. Two new scientific studies published in the academic journal Ecological Solution and Evidence show the huge impact that change has had for nature across the 1500 hectare landscape, with plant diversity increased by over 40% and a five-fold increase in the number of butterflies. In the absence of sheep, Ravin Rightly from the University of Leeds School of Earth and Environment co-author both studies and says the research provides long-term evidence of how different grazing impact biodiversity and can help inform discussions about restorations. Next. These changes, however, are not ones that all farmers welcome. Some I spoke to look at the landscape and see only lost livestock pasture and question how their way of life and livelihoods fit into such a future. But David Sterner's Uplands North Group chair at the NFU says it's possible for the rebuilding lobby and the farmers to find common ground to understand better what natural England wants from the uplands, what wildlife trusts want. They need to understand what we, the farmers, want, he says. There needs to be compromise and respect on all sides. How Muslim communities could make a difference. But there is a ray of sunshine for the industry, according to Phil Stoker from the National Sheep Association. He believes the domestic market for sheep meat is going to keep driving forward, in large part thanks to demand from the increasing number of Muslim people in the UK. ASDV statistics suggest that 80% of halal consumers eat lamb on a weekly basis and 64% eat mutton weekly. By contrast, only 6% of the general UK population eats lamb each week. According to the ASDB, while Muslims make up around 6.5% of the UK population, they account for 30% of lamb sales annually. Lamb is often Muslim consumers' meat of choice for family occasions and festivals like Ramadan and Eid, and while mutton is a popular ingredient in curries and stews. Next. Because of this, Stoker says he doesn't envisage the total demise of the industry, but right now he adds we are surviving by people's interest, by market demand, almost in spite of the work that the policy makers and doing others are doing on agricultural and land management policy. Next. A worst case scenario for farmers and consumers would see UK lamb become even more expensive and less common on our shelves in favor of ever more shipmate imported from major suppliers like New Zealand and Australia. The ASDB project sheep are likely to decrease in number across many farms but take a work in the Lake District or Wells Mountains in another 25 years, and you will likely still see sheep dotting the hillsides. Farmers and conservationists alike told me they need to see clear plans for what policymakers want from the uplands for the next generation. Their hope is that as we move into the second quarter of the 21st century, traditional sheep farmers and rebuilders alike find their place in the nation's cherished uplands.